Hi, my name is Maddie Dinowitz,
Hi, I'm Invita Sharma.
and for the past year, we've been studying under the faculty research mentor Moana McClellan, looking at various factors of environmental justice within Los Angeles. Environmental justice is defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race or income, with respect to development and enforcement of environmental laws and policies. Certain BIPOC communities, or who are of lower socioeconomic status, are at risk of poor health based on the urban regions they occupy. Noise pollution, air pollution, and access to healthy food were three key top concerns of environmental health that the IOES study further investigated.
What is this IMES study? Well, this is the study that our research works off of to both contextualize and form with new results. In this study, students from the Institute of Environment and Sustainability at UCLA examined environmental justice for the purpose of informing a nonprofit organization called SJLI regarding Inglewood's environmental health. How they did this was they conducted their research in two phases. In phase one, students generated broad questions to help define and understand what the biggest causes for concern were for Inglewood residents in terms of the environment. They conducted interviews, transcribed those interviews, and were left with qualitative data that propelled phase two. And in phase two, surveys were conducted based on the interview data of individuals in Inglewood as well as Santa Monica to understand the disparity between these two similar sized and similar population cities, but which differ on income in terms of environmental health. Um, at first, the sample size for the surveys was too small, so students conducted more surveys in the summer. However, these surveys were not fully analyzed, and that is where Maddie's research comes in.
More specifically, in order to evaluate environmental justice within Inglewood and Santa Monica, my objectives were to analyze the updated data from phase two of the survey. My ultimate goal was to see if trends pertaining to food quality and noise and air pollution have stayed consistent, and if not, then to find where those areas of concern are.
In my research, what I do conversely is I break off from the study or analyzing it and rather seek to contextualize it by using publicly available data from noise monitoring stations, air pollution monitoring stations, and food access data to put the study in context.
In order to compare the new survey data to the old, I needed to create graphs based on the new survey responses to see what trends have stayed the same or changed. Firstly, with the help of my mentor, I used RStudio to code bar graphs with all the newly recorded data. I insert an example of one of the graphs below. These graphs help to discern what the main differences are between Santa Monica and Inglewood. Once I made graphs pertaining to all of the questions and this data from the survey, I could start my analysis and test for statistical significance. First, I looked at the most significant differences between the two cities within the bar graphs. Once I finished analyzing the data from the bar graphs, I began to do a series of chi-square tests to find the most prominent issues within Santa Monica and Inglewood. Once calculating the p-values from the respective graphs, I then controlled the false discovery rate using the Benjamini-Hochberg procedure. I set my false discovery rate to 0.05%, which means the probability of finding a false positive will be less than 5%. Then I was able to see which graphs from the survey were statistically significant.
In my research, I first broadly searched online to find data sets for noise and air pollution as well as food accessibility. Quickly, I came across a problem in that I wasn't able to find noise data for Inglewood and Santa Monica that matched up. So we decided to let go of analyzing noise pollution on a public data level. Instead, we focused on air pollution and food accessibility. And through this research, I found CalEnviroscreen data and the California Healthy Places Index, which is informed by the CalEnviroscreen data, as well as the US Food Access Research Atlas, which is a product of the USDA. I found these two data sets to be most helpful to create maps to compare the variables between Santa Monica and Inglewood using QGIS to create a visual comparison.
All the graphs I chose to test from the survey were statistically significant except for one, which means that the results were unlikely due to chance. But first, it's important to look at the demographics. Minority and low income groups are at greater risks of environmental justice. Based on our research, we know that Inglewood shares these demographics, so it's essential that we keep this information in mind when looking at the data. Beginning with air pollution, it appears that air pollution from cars and trucks is the top concern for those who reside in both Santa Monica and Inglewood, yet far more important for those in Santa Monica. Despite air quality being the greatest area of concern for both cities, the majority of residents claim they have not experienced any health symptoms that could be related to the air pollution they breathe. However, there appeared to be certain cases that were statistically significant, as residents in Inglewood had higher rates of asthma, headaches, and fatigue. When looking at food accessibility, it was found that Santa Monica and Inglewood overwhelmingly differ in their opinions that local grocery stores have high quality fruits and vegetables. The difference between respondents for completely true is statistically significant, as far more residents in Santa Monica believe they have access to these things. Similarly, it was found that in Santa Monica, um, residents believe that they eat more healthy food than those in Inglewood. It's notable to consider the fact that most residents in Santa Monica have a larger economic income than those in Inglewood and can probably afford more expensive food such as organic produce. Lastly, it is interesting to see that both cities majorly agreed that healthy food is too expensive. Now, when looking at noise pollution, while it was not the major area of concern for either city, there are some interesting results. One significant finding was that Inglewood overwhelmingly felt that airplane traffic was the main cause of noise pollution in their neighborhood. It is notable to consider Inglewood's proximity to LAX. So, with this in mind, it makes sense that Santa Monica surveyors doubled that of Inglewood when claiming that they are not bothered by airplane noise.
For my research, what we created was first a map of the annual mean PM2.5 levels in cubic micrograms in Inglewood and Santa Monica. This, these estimates were generated from the California Healthy Places Index, which pulled their information from the California Air Resources Board monitoring stations. In this map, we can see that both Inglewood and Santa Monica have extremely unhealthy levels of PM2.5 pollution. 12 micrograms per cubic meter is defined as the threshold of safety by the EPA. However, already being at this threshold means that populations are living in unhealthy conditions. Beyond 12 micrograms per cubic meter, 15 micrograms per cubic meter is defined as the secondary standard, where at this threshold, air pollution is unhealthy for both the general population and causes adverse effects and environmental damage in the surroundings. As we can see, based on this, Inglewood is extremely unhealthy for both sensitive groups like asthmatics and young children, as well as the general population, being at 12 to 15 micrograms per cubic meter level. And Santa Monica doesn't fare much better, only having slightly better results in that two census tracts are below the threshold of what's considered unsafe. However, even this is still nearing the threshold of what's hazardous. In terms of food access, this map, which is again generated from the results of the California Healthy Places Index, this map illustrates the percentage of people residing less than half a mile away from a grocery store, which is the definition of what is having healthy food access. As we can see, Inglewood has 7 out of 31 tracts, where 10% or less of the population meets this standard. However, there are no such tracts in Santa Monica. But in terms of the high levels, Santa Monica has 13 out of 19 of the tracts, which have 90 to 100% of the population in the tracts meeting the standard for this healthy access. Conversely, Inglewood, which has 31 tracts, also has 13 out of 31 tracts which meet the standard for 90% or higher of their population having a normal, healthy food access. Thank you so much for listening to our research, and we hope these results were informative to you.